two kinds of complément d'objet in French, the direct or the indirect one. Today, it's all about the indirect complements or complément d'objet indirect. For more information on the complément d'objet direct or pronom d'objet direct, please click on our previous video here. And of course, we cover this very topic in great length in lesson 26 of my complete French course at Learn French with Alexa, the actual website. In order to understand what the complément d'objet indirect is, I think it is important to show you through an example what the role of the complément d'objet indirect is. Now let's take a look at this sentence. Okay, here's my question. Which is the complément d'objet direct and which is the complément d'objet indirect in that sentence? Safia donne une pomme à Julie. Safia donne une pomme à Julie. Now here, you can see that we have a subject, Safia. Safia is the subject. Now where is the verb? That's right. The verb is donne, to give. Now Safia gives une pomme. What is une pomme? It is the complément d'objet direct to the verb donner. So, Safia donne quoi? Safia gives what? She gives an apple. And so, what is à Julie? That's right. Julie is the indirect object of the verb donner. Can you see what we've done? So, Safia donne une pomme à Julie. Safia gives what? An apple, which is the complément to donner. To whom? To Julie, which is the indirect complément to the verb donner. So to find the indirect object complement in a sentence, we usually use different questions. So, for example, à quoi, to what, or à qui, to whom, or de quoi, of what, ou de qui, of whom. We call this a complément indirect because it is introduced by a preposition such as à or de. In the case of our example, we have donner à, to give to someone. And that will lead to a complément d'objet indirect because donner is followed by the preposition à. There are many verbs actually that leads to a complément d'objet indirect because they have de or à added to their verb, okay, to them. For example, demander à, to ask someone. Parler à, to talk to someone. And knowing them is very relevant when you need to use the right indirect object pronouns, which replaces the indirect object complement. And this brings me to this. What is the difference, you may ask, between the complément d'objet indirect or indirect object complement and the pronom d'objet indirect, indirect object pronouns? Now let's have a look at an example that actually will show you the link between the complément d'objet indirect and the pronom d'objet indirect. To put it quite simply, it is used to replace a name or a noun introduced by a preposition such as à or de, which I've mentioned earlier. For example, Safia donne une pomme à Julie. So, Safia gives what? An apple to whom? To Julie. Now, early on, we established that to Julie or à Julie was the actual indirect object complement. So what we need to do now is replace this à Julie by a pronoun. How are we going to do that? Well, you will need to know your indirect object pronouns in order to do that. In this case, we would say Safia lui donne une pomme. We replaced à Julie by lui. Okay, let me show you all the indirect object pronouns in order for you to understand, but where does lui come from. Now, here's a list of the indirect object pronouns. As I said to you in another video, I covered the direct object pronouns, which sometimes overlap and sometimes are the same. But today it is all about the indirect object pronouns. So have a look at the first one, me, which literally translates as to me. For example, tu donnes une pomme à moi. You give an apple to me. If we were to replace this à moi with an indirect object pronoun, it will be me. Tu me donnes une pomme, which will be translated as you give me an apple. Now, because we are using the verb donner à quelqu'un, donner plus preposition. So give it to someone. Okay, or give to someone. Now, of course, I said tu donnes une pomme à moi. À moi wouldn't naturally be used in a sentence as such, this one. I'm adding it here as a way to show you how to add the pronouns afterwards. So, tu me donnes will be the more natural way of saying you give me an apple. And the same goes for to you. To you would be translated in French in an indirect form as te. For example, elle demande à toi. She asks you. Effectively, that's what we want to say. Elle demande. So you want to replace à toi by an indirect object pronouns, it becomes elle te demande. She asks you. So the verb we are using again brings an indirect object pronoun or complément, which is demander à. Demander à quelqu'un, to ask someone. Earlier on, I gave you the example using à Julie. And I said that in order to replace Julie, you must use lui. This is the indirect pronoun that I want to cover now. Lui means to him or to her, regardless of gender. Son ami prête de l'argent à Tom. Have a look at this example. His friend lends some money to Tom. Now, here to Tom is the indirect object complement, but we want to replace to Tom by an indirect object, a pronoun, which is here lui. So we would say son ami lui prête de l'argent. His friend lends him or her money. And again, we are using prêter à quelqu'un, to lend to someone or to lend someone something. Again, prêter has a preposition afterwards, so therefore we lead to an indirect object complement and therefore indirect object pronoun. Let's have a look at the way we translate to us, nous. For example, elle envoie une photo à nous. She sends a picture to us. Or we want to say she sends us a picture. So we would use nous to replace à nous. For example, elle nous envoie une photo. She sends us a picture. Here, the verb we are using is envoyer à, to send to someone, or envoyer à quelqu'un, to send to someone. Now, let's have a look at how we translate to you. Vous, vous. Vous is going to replace à vous. For example, il dit la vérité à vous. He tells the truth to you. Or we would say, il vous dit la vérité, which sounds better than à vous. Like I mentioned to à moi earlier on, à vous is the same. So we would say, il vous dit la vérité, tells you the truth. So we would use directly the indirect object pronoun rather than putting it at the end of the sentence. The verb is dire la vérité à. So to tell the truth to someone, à quelqu'un. Now to finish, how do you say to them? Well, to them is leur. For example, Paul dit à Tom et Safia de partir. Paul tells Tom and Safia to leave. So where is this indirect object complement? Well, it is à Tom et Safia. Now, if you were to replace Tom and Safia, we would say them. So put that into the indirect object complement. Paul tells them to leave. So in French, it will be Paul leur dit de partir. Now, by now, you may have noticed that all these indirect object pronouns are placed before the verb in a sentence. There is a practice exercise on the support guide. And if you want the support guide, you need to join my community by clicking on the join button below. And if you want, of course, a revision with the direct object pronouns, please click here. That's it for me. Au revoir. À bientôt. Bisous, bisous.